Hello and welcome to my video, Getting Started with Packet Tracer. If you haven't already installed Packet Tracer, please see my previous video about downloading and installing Packet Tracer. In this video, we're going to talk about selecting end devices, switches, and routers, the basic configuration of end devices, switches, and routers. We'll talk about creating links between devices, deleting devices and links, and we'll also learn about adding notes to the background. So let's get started. Okay, now that I've got Packet Tracer started, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the devices I can use. So if I come down here to the bottom left corner, I see a few selections. I have network devices, end devices, components, connections, miscellaneous, and multi-user connections. Primarily what most students are going to be using will be network devices, end devices, and the connections. So let's take a look at network devices. Under network devices, I have routers, switches, hubs, wireless devices, security, and WAN emulation. Now if I go to the end devices, I have the choice, but within end devices I can do home, smart city. Primarily we're going to be focusing on the end devices itself here. PC, laptop, server, so and so. So let's start with adding a router. So to add a router, I'm going to click on network devices and make sure the router icon is active here. And I can just click and drag and bring a router up to my background. Next thing I'm going to do is add a switch, so I'll go ahead and just take a 2960 here, and lastly I'll go ahead and bring a PC up. Now I can always go back and click and drag and get these things a little bit better lined up. Next thing I want to do is create some links. So I'll go to my connections tab, and in there I have automatically choose, console cable, copper straight through, copper crossover, and fiber. So those are going to be the ones we'll focus on mostly. So let's go ahead and take a copper straight through, and I'm going to click on the PC, select Fast Ethernet 0, and I'll choose an Ethernet port on the switch. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the switch and take Ethernet 2 of the switch and connect it to gigabit 000 of the router. Now while we're here, let's take a look at a couple of things under our options preferences. In here is where I can turn off and on the port labels, device name label, device model name labels, and let's take a real quick look at that. So now I've got nothing except the port label showing up. But these labels can kind of get in the way, so let's find a solution for that. So I'm going to go up here to my notes icon, and then I can add notes to my background. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the subnet ID 192.168.10.0/24, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the host portion of my addresses down here by my devices .1, and then I'll put .10 for my PC. And the next thing I want to look at is I'm not really fond of where these interface IDs sit. I'd like to be able to move them, but you can't in Packet Tracer. I can go ahead and I can try to click it. It's not going to let me move them. So instead what I'll do is I'll just create some notes for that also. FA0, FA0/1, FA0/2, and gig 0/0/0. And you'll see why this can be important when I turn the device labels back on. So let me go back to my pointer tool, and I'm going to position these a little bit better, and we will go ahead and turn on the device ID labels. It can get kind of busy sometimes. So back to preferences, and I'll turn on my device model and names, and I'll turn off the port labels, and let's see what that looks like. So now that I have this here, I can go ahead and move these and position them wherever I need them to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on my network. And let's move that up here. I'll move this down and kind of keep that .1 a little further away from the device model number. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and start configuring the devices. So on the PC, I can go and I'm going to click on the desktop icon. And on the desktop icon, I can just go right here and click the IP configuration. And from here is where I can put in the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. 192.168.10.1. And it's going to default to the classful IP subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And lastly, I'll put in the default gateway, 192.168.10.1. Actually, my address is actually 10.10, so let's get that fixed. So now I can close this, and I'll close the desktop, and let me go on over here to the router. And once I'm in the router, I'm going to go over here to the config tab. I'm going to go all the way down here to gigabit 000. That's the actual interface I want to configure. And if I notice right here, and let's move this out of the way so we can see what's happening. Notice here I've got red triangles on the router interface. Well, that's because router interfaces are turned off by default. So watch what happens when I click this checkbox and it's turned on, but the switch is taking its time going green and forwarding traffic. So I'm going to click the fast forward right there and get that moving. Now I'll go back to my router, and I'm under gigabit 000 still, so I'm going to give it its IP address, 192.168.10.1, and it's going to default again to the classful subnet mask. So now that I've got my router configured and my PC configured, let's go ahead and take a look and see how we did. So I'm going to go back and click on the PC and go into the command line. I can type ipconfig, and there's my IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and I can do a test ping, 192.168.10.1, and I'm pinging. So the last thing we want to do is talk about how to delete stuff. Let's say I've got the wrong model switch here. Maybe if I go back here to the network devices under switches, maybe I wanted to use a 3560 instead of the 2960. So what I can do is I can go here to my delete icon, and you got to be careful because sometimes you'll see that a device is active, and when you click delete, it wants to delete it. So I'm going to just cancel that, and I'm going to highlight my delete button again, and now I see this red cross here, so let me click on that. And it's going to ask me to confirm, do I want to delete switch 0? Sure, let me go ahead and delete that. And of course, when you delete the switch, then you delete the links also. So let's go and back to, actually get out of the delete tab and go back to my pointer. Now I can go back and I'll bring this switch up instead. And of course, now I have to create new connections, gigabit 0, fast Ethernet 0 to fast Ethernet 01, and then I'll do it again, 02, and I'll connect that to the router. And let me move the switch up a little bit and get my line straight. And lastly, I'll hit fast forward again to get those ports forwarding. So anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.